Hello, everybody, and welcome on this dark and I suppose it was wet, but it's no longer wet. Dark Thursday evening, and welcome to this very second episode of the Saboteurs, revealing the characters that refuse to follow the plan, made by their wonderful DMs who put time and effort in, only to be ruined by characters and players. But this week, we have a wonderful human who's going to come and join us. And we're going to talk about characters that are not human of theirs, mainly looking at clerics, gods, trickery, graves, death. But this is somebody that I love very, very dearly, and I'd like to welcome Mr. Stuart Trainer. How you doing, mate?
Hello, not too bad yourself?
Yes, good. I'm very, very well, thank you. I'm loving the setup. All the blue.
It's very Twitch streamery. I thought I'd indulge it all.
It's just one of those things, is that look, isn't it, of the blue. I mean, I got to do something like that, but today I just had my usual court jesters with me, who are here to pass judgment on you and your characters. I do want to put a bit of a disclaimer on today that we are going to be talking about A Tomb of Annihilation quite a lot. So as my good friend Erky would say, spoiler alert. So just be careful about that. But you've been playing D&D for a while, I would say.
It's been 3-4 years now, I think it is. So not the kind of like most experienced player out there, but I've played a lot. It was one of those things that so I picked it up from just joined a colleague's game at work who developed from being a colleague into a really good mate and stuff. And then the moment I had that first session, I came away and was like, this is my thing. This is I found it, and I'm going to do this all the time from now on. And it's been campaign after campaign after crossovers and all sorts ever since. So it's 4 years now. Yeah.
Wow. So you played a lot of mostly modules, homebrews, that kind of stuff, or do you a bit of both?
We started out with the starter kit, did the whole Lost Mines of Phandalin, and then that kind of grew onto a homebrew kind of adventure that kind of spun off of that, and then that went through. And then what we've done is, because it's all set in the same setting and stuff like that, is we've slotted in the modules, but we tried to create like a linear timeline with them all, so that everything has a lasting effect on the universe itself, which has been really fun. And so we've gone on from starter kit onto the homebrew one. Then we did Storm's King Thunder. Then we did Tomb of Annihilation. Hopped on to Dragon Heist for a bit. Now we're doing Tyranny, but we're doing it in such a weird order because I mean, if we were to do it by release, then maybe it kind of might work out. But I think we've gone on to the more epic, world-changing aspect ones now with Tyranny, which is going to be quite fun. And we've also slotted in some homebrew things in between as and when we can, which is really interesting.
Because it's good as because each of you take different modules, really, isn't it? It's kind of how your group.
Yeah, so rather than having a forever DM, we try and share it out, which is always really kind of useful because DM burnout is like definitely a thing. Kind of seeing it at the moment with a couple of people where, like myself included, where you take on too many campaigns to fill the void, and then you realize when all of them come knocking at the door going, can we play? And you're like, oh no, damn it, I've got to prepare how many sessions this week? Shit. And then you start running around frantically and going, oh, okay, right, what can I use here? What can I use there? But yeah, so at the moment I'm quite fortunate in that I'm running Frostmaiden as DM and then playing and everything else, which is nice and useful.
That is really nice. I'm doing the same actually because Josh is running Frostmaiden for us, but we're doing it like alternate Wednesdays. So I run the Pirates on one Wednesday, and then he takes over and does Frostmaiden on the Wednesday as well, which is
having that decent break's got to be really good.
Oh yeah, I got to a point where I was starting to like not be able to come up with enough story for the Pirates, because he's sort of, you think over and then you're on to more. That's Monday, and then you've got 2 days, and then you do the Pirates, and then you're thinking about Monday, and so so I'm really glad about it. That's actually really helped us in the other one,
especially for homebrew stuff. So I was running a homebrew one that started So we were meant to have our first session in person, and then literally first lockdown hit back in March, and so we cut it, went online, and it ended just as second lockdown came into effect. So it was like it kind of went through the whole gamut of everything. But yeah, I was running that weekly on Tuesdays, and getting the materials together for a homebrew one is just so mentally taxing. Like I don't think enough credit is given to DMs out there in terms of, because until you're in the seat, I don't think you quite realize how much work they put in. And as a player, like previously, I was quite selfish. I was like, I want to play all the time, and then I can now understand the pushback of just give me a week.
Give me a week, please. So you kind of understand both sides of the being sabotage and being the saboteurs, and
yeah, and you'd think with that I might have a little bit more kind of respect for them, but no.
Nah.
Players are there to sabotage.
Yeah, man. It's called revenge. That's the whole point. It's called revenge, mate.
Yeah.
Because I think you've created some of the most like iconic characters for me. We've played together, and safety characters that I feel have like huge backstories and like huge concepts. Especially when we were playing with Tomb. I mean, we played that all the way through for, what was it, 15 months, 12 months?
It was a long one, yeah.
It was a long one.
At least a year, yeah.
Yeah, at least a year. And in there you played a couple of different characters, one of which we rejected.
Four in total.
Four in total?
Yeah, because there was... so I had the original one, which was Lachlan, who was meant to be from one to the end, but didn't quite work out. He kicked the bucket, sadly, and then came in with a temporary character that I was like immediately did not like, because I came up with the concept within about 5 minutes and was like, nope, scrap that. Came in with the rejected character after that, which was politely asked not to follow us. Go elsewhere. It's like that annoying younger kid hanging out with the cool kids.
Oh my god.
And then finally ended up with Tilly, who
is a god.
Took it through to the end.
Yeah.
She'd like to maybe think that she is, but I don't think it's like that level.
Oh, mate, I mean, she's literally one of the strongest characters on paper I think I've ever seen.
Yeah. By the end, I mean, that was quite funny. In preparation for this, I kind of went through some old cheats and stuff like that, and I came across her character one, and I just looked through and just saw base stats that were, for 3 of them, that were above 20, and I just went, what did you give me? But then narratively, I think it kind of worked because of the whole god-eating aspect that came towards the end, and the whole idea of her saying, no, give them all to me, and I can become like a Megazord, rather than just like sharing them out, which is, as a character, very selfish. As a player, very selfish, but I was very aware and was constantly going, are you guys okay with this? I really feel guilty.
But I think we were all so intrigued about what would happen if you ate them all, but also like just out of like, what is she doing? Like, what's going on?
But I think the scariest thing about the whole thing is that she didn't even know, which was crazy. Yeah. The whole time she was just there, just going, well, kind of trust what's going on here, so I'm going to follow it. But
yeah, well, we're going to talk about Tilly and Lachlan at length a little bit later on. But I think the kind of the first kind of questions I kind of want to ask you really is, when you come up with a character or a character concept, what's the kind of the things that you think about the most, or like, and why? So are you more of mechanical thought, or is it a concept that you've taken from fiction or something like that?
It's a couple of things, really. Firstly, I kind of look at the classes and the races that I've not played, or the ones that I have an interest in playing. So Furbolgs with Lachlan at the very beginning, where I was very much like, no one's brought a Furbolg into the universe, not even as an NPC at this point. I was just like, so when I went through the monster manual, came across those, I was like, that's next. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but that's next. And then secondly, coming to that with class, it was another thing of like, I kind of feel like I'm a bit of a completionist with some aspects of the game, and like I have to play that to be able to like complete it all. I'll never do it with the amount of subclasses that now exists. Thank you, Chris
Passion.
Perkins, for all of those. But the addition of like sort of all of those makes that a bit of an impossible task. So I kind of just look at it, but I kind of spin the wheel and go, that seems to be quite cool. But I think mechanics aside, I try to think of a theme generally for them, and it kind of sounds a bit wanky and like, but it's generally kind of try to attribute each character with a certain aspect of my personal life that I'd like to bring into it as well. So with my very first one, and being a bit unsure of the rules, being a bit kind of uncertain myself about playing, and also going through a bit of imposter syndrome in my own life, I was like, that's a great thing to kind of explore because naturally I'll fall into it. I'll know how to explore it completely. And then, so that kind of, which is why I came up with a charlatan dwarf fighter that was rejected from his nobility because he was selling counterfeit war memorabilia, which was just the most ridiculous concept. And then yeah, so like, and then with later ones and stuff, it's been pretty much I followed that same kind of way of kind of generating characters. Is I kind of focus on something that I want to explore. So there's been ones that have been grief. There's been other ones which are just small sense of abandonment. Christ, is getting deep. And then you've also got ones that I'm just saying, I'm like, no, I'm feeling like a little sassy. I just want to tell power to fuck off. And so there's been those kind of like rebels and stuff like that as well, which have been kind of me just wanting to take an aspect that I don't think that I necessarily am good at and just exploring it a little bit more.
But I think that's the joy of character creation for roleplay, isn't it? It's like, this is something that either I can be that I'm not, or this is something that I know I can explore and push and share with others as well. And I know that sounds wanky, but that's what roleplay is, right? That's what
exactly.
It's great.
I mean, I think you definitely drilled into it because I mean, you do get the aspirational players, you do get your Sorkadins who are looking for their long swords, and you get like kind of the people that just want to play the hero and be the really embellished kind of heroics, and then you get others that get quite introspective, and I find the introspective route to be a bit better for me because I find that it's easier to play the character that way because you're falling on something familiar. You're not. I think one of my bugbears for myself is when I'm sat at the table and I'm like, oh, what would my character do in this point? And I hate that. I hate thinking about it because I kind of want to know the character well enough to be able to go, they do this, have that instinctual reaction, and to be able to play the character truly because they are a small aspect of myself, I guess.
Yeah, you've already got it because it's like, what would I do rather than
kind of. And I'm just like, well, I put myself in this situation, but I put myself in that situation if I could cast spells. Makes sense that way, yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, I would cast Fireball in a small room. Leave me alone.
I mean, do you ever consider with your characters of like where you think they might go or where they might end up when you sort of start? Do you kind of go, oh, okay, I think I've got an end goal of where I think they want to be?
Yeah, there's so there's been like the first character I made was rejected from nobility and like from a royal lineage, and I was like, well, the obvious character arc is there. He's a charlatan that wants to learn from his mistakes and embraces his lineage and become the hero that he was born to be, kind of thing. Kind of like the simpler characters like that have that kind of ingrained in them from being a bit of an archetype. And then there's others where I've gone the complete opposite route. And I think that's a rejection from playing the same thing over and over again, where I've just said, here's the starting point, and it could go anywhere. And I really mean anywhere. And I've done that to a degree where I've had chats with the DM beforehand, where that's been asked to be. They go kind of, where do you see it going? And I just go, beats me. Like, face down in the tomb. Who knows? Like,
who knows?
It could happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much a fan of that style of play as well. Especially I think there was a moment when I was playing with Romronth,
Mhm.
and when we were in the same campaign together for Tomb, and I think Tom, when Tom had this thing of being able to throw the ultimate bone at you to see or away from you and see
He,
what you would do.
he was the absolute worst for that. He
He
would
was the
find the
best for
very
that.
thing, the best at it, but it was a terrible thing to do. In terms of like, he would just the very thing that you would abandon your friends for, he would dangle in front of you just to test your will and like your character's thing. And this is the thing is, I think we all went into Tomb as quite kind of a fairly experienced group of players, but at that point, like I think that we'd all kind of hit a stride with how we played, and you and Josh were incredibly like came with a ton of experience in terms of how to play, and so it was that feeling of comfort as well, being able to do that, and
Mm,
to know that characters can walk away, they can come back, they can do whatever they like because it's a character choice and it's not a hurtful choice to a player.
mm-hmm,
And that's why I kind of like D&D when it gets to that point where you find a maturity in play style where
mm,
you can not have the perfect campaign of like the characters all make it through to the end and they all get a medal at the end and it's lovely and warm and celebrations and stuff. No, sometimes we're there to tell a story, and if that's the most compelling point for that character, that point for that story, then
yeah.
that's great for me. I love it.
And I think that's something that Tom does incredibly well is
Mhm.
feel the safety to kind of play whatever you want. But you
Yeah,
also know with Tom that he's writing down every single detail just to kind of, just in
yeah,
case, even if it's just like a choice appearance or an epilogue. I mean, epilogues were
hmm,
fantastic with Tom. Um,
yeah. Does love
but
his epilogues.
oh, he loves epilogues. They were so good. They were brilliant. But I think it's that thing of you're never sure what to do. So it's that sudden
Hmm.
moment of, hey, your people are at war. What are you going to do? I'm going to leave.
Yeah,
And then it was like,
and
okay, fair enough.
that's the thing. It's like it's sometimes there are complex choices. It's not always get to the Greek and kill the baddie. It's like it's more compelling stories out there to be told beyond that. And I think if you enable your players to do it, it's a great thing to be a part of, especially when like we do make those difficult decisions. Because I think some of the more lasting things that have ever happened in games have been things that have been horrible. Like, and it's
Mm,
like we've had it so where characters have not necessarily died, but they've had horrible things happen to them in terms of like sort of we've had some characters that have literally been blinked out of existence so that no one
yeah,
remembers them. And it's like stuff like that is so horrendously bleak, but it's the thing I always go to and remember because I love that story.
yeah.
Whether or not it's a nice story is another thing. But we have also those moments as well, which is
Yes,
why it's all the balancing act.
exactly. Exactly. It's all a balancing act. Um, but I think there is something you said there about stories that have already been told and then new
Mhm.
stories. So like, is there anything that you've sort of found from published guides and like published material that has helped you with character choices or with character concepts?
Not a great deal. I tend to not find, at least from anything from Wizards, at least, like I treat that source material as that's nice, but that's what they think of the universe and what it is. I tend to draw more of my kind of character ideas from like film media from elsewhere.
Hmm.
Like there are certain kind of influences that I'm just like, I love that story. I want to tell that, but in the medium of D&D.
Hmm.
But in terms of finding the mechanics, I've tried it. When I was playing a Harper, I went through and read the whole Harper manual from way back. I think it was like in uh, AD&D, I think it was. Found an old PDF of that and trawled through it and kind of found some elements that were quite nice, like the whole thing of the invisible badge and being able to like kind of to show your allegiance, which is quite a nice thing to take. But it was just small aspects rather than the larger character ones, I think.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I do kind of with the old books trying to trawl through them for character ideas. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever done that really.
Mm.
So I
So
know
I
you're a
found,
big one for that.
oh yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, the complete guides, sort of 1988 to like 92 complete
Mm,
guides are absolutely brilliant. if you ever kind of get your hands on it. It just sort of opens up the ideas of what you could do. Like I was looking one recently of the thief, like a big guide to the thief, and they had this great concept in there, which was the artist,
Oh yeah.
of the idea of the artist thief, who you would, for instance, if you saw a drunk noble walking down the street, wouldn't rob them, but instead would help them get home, earn their trust to be able to go to their dinner for harvest time, and then take the one Fabergé egg from their bedroom whilst they're at a party where nobody can see it. And I was just like, that's a great concept of like,
I do love that. Think about things a bit more complexly than just like sort of you say you've got a thief and you've got base level instincts of just yes, I want to rob, but having a bit more of an involved thought of it and just go, no, I'm gonna play the long game with this. I love that aspect.
yeah, it's just so much good
That's
fun
so
in there.
cool.
So do check them out. I mean, the other thing is, I think it's Xanathars, maybe. Might be Xanathars, where it's like they got loads of background rolling tables.
Yeah.
I've used that a couple of times. So I did Albus was through rolling tables.
Really?
Yeah, just rolling tables. I had so much fun with that one. You know, being born in the
I didn't know
Shadowfell
the
came from a
tables could
table.
get that evil.
I know. But anyway, I think maybe we should try moving on to one of the characters, maybe, and like have a chat about
Sure.
that. So I think, as I said before, we were playing Tomb of Annihilation.
Yeah.
Also, I'm just saying, guys, I'm noticing that my frame rates are jumping up a little bit and going up and down a little bit. So if we are a bit sticky, I'm very, very sorry. No idea. Internet connection. First day in it. So, so I'm gonna have a look. So we're gonna talk about Lachlan. We've got a wonderful. Oh, Darren's here. Hello, Darren. Just so make sure he said hello. That Lachlan was part of Tomb of Annihilation, and I wondered if you could just describe Lachlan for us. We've got a picture up so we can all see what he looks like.
So annoyingly, I tried to source the artist of this because I slightly edited the image that I did find online for it. But like, I'd like to describe Lachlan as a big blue hug because I thought, knowing Tomb's reputation, knowing everything, I wanted a character that could be that. Okay, we've had a day. Let's decompress and let's talk about things. And I wanted him to be that dependable, safe pair of hands that everyone could turn to and stuff. So Big Blue Hug was the initial concept in the sense that like he was just this big bulking, like almost like should be considered quite a physically imposing creature, but was incredibly tender and soft. So he had a very slight Scottish accent that was very soft, which is me just pulling from grandparents and just obviously going towards that aspect of things. And in that kind of soft natured, I kind of aspect of him, I just wanted to kind of mirror the fact that Tomb was going to be horrendous. Like I knew how bleak it was going to get, and I wanted some contrast in there. Otherwise, if it was just us fighting against the nature of Chult, it would have been awful. It would have been so bleak, I think, if we didn't have that. And what was quite funny is when we did come to play it, and all the characters had an aspect of that built into them. This like kind of little sensitivity of just like, yeah, okay, we're here to fight something, but also all of us are big softies. I think deep within, it was quite telling. Maybe not Rumrunt. Rumrunt was a bit.
Oh, Rumrunt's a pussycat, man. You know, he just wanted a new bloodline. It's fine. But then Lachlan was a grave cleric as well.
He was.
And you had this amazing story of their partner or their wife.
Ella.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought, Furbolgs, why are they big? Why are they large? Why are they furry? They must be from the north. It must be colder climates and stuff. So I was looking about where we could put them, and the Moonwood kind of just seemed quite natural to kind of just plop them in and be from around there. But then I was looking at it, and Furbolgs have I think a maximum lifespan of about 500 years. And I've always been fascinated by that with elves and things. There's just this concept of just creatures of just, what the fuck do they do with all that time? There's just so much of it available to them. So what I wanted, and I remember Tom, the DM at the time, he was saying that he said that it'd be useful if someone in the group had a background in archaeology or anything tomb based, because obviously that would be a small boon to the party, obviously. And I was like, oh, I don't really want to take that myself because I don't envisage him being a real tomb raider or anything like that. But the wife could have been. So I had this idea of the pair of them just traveling and for like coming up with a tome of knowledge of the world of the Sword Coast that they could then hand down to their family and continually just pass on. And so what they did is they made their way down from the Moonwood down to Waterdeep, all the way down to like past the Troll Hills and stuff, all the way round Comanthor. Like it was a huge route. Across the Sea of Falling Stars, I think it was, and then towards the end, as we got to, I think it was the Chundlewood. Yep, just looked that up. Got to Chundlewood, and she died. And she died just before they had decided to start ending things and making their way back so they could finish this tome and hand it off. And it was a really kind of bleak background because Lachlan, in his grief, turned and made a plea out into the ether of just who the hell can make sure that she is safe, because she's been his life partner for 200 odd years at that point. And the Raven Queen turned up and was like, sure, but you're gonna have to help me with others. And he was like, yeah, sure thing, crack on, I'll do whatever's needed. And so from then on, he kind of had that he had that connection with the Raven Queen, which was a bit of a pantheon shift in our world as well, because we had a very 5th edition one, but the Raven Queen seemed narratively a bit to work a bit better with the whole ushering of the soul and protecting it. And he continued on as a cleric in her name, knowing full well that if he was doing things in accordance with what she wanted, that his wife would be safe in the afterlife.
Yeah, everything that's
bleak.
Bleak, and you had this wonderful diary that you kept. I mean, I don't know if you personally kept it, but the journal.
Every session had a journal entry which I wrote afterwards, which was talking about, some of them very short because obviously the amount of prep that goes in between stuff is kind of, it wanes as the campaign goes on, and you have moments where you're up and down. At first they started out at being like a fair few number of pages, and then eventually it ends up being like a quick short, almost like a summary of the events for that day, and then just some afterthoughts at the end. But it was always written as if I was talking to her, which was the saddest thing ever.
It was really sad.
It was one of those small little character secrets that none of you, I think, knew. I don't think I'd ever articulated that to any of you. But I mentioned to Tom as a passing thing, and I was like, that's just how it's going to get played. And I like having those little secrets. I think they're fun.
Yeah, because that book became really important to us.
It did.
We didn't necessarily be... Yeah, of course, big problems. But it was also, I found interesting, it was your character that kept trying to steal it back every time. Your lead characters would try and steal it back. But then we would become really protective of that book.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a ship got named after Lachlan in the end.
Yeah, he had quite a bit of a legacy. There was the Lachlan ship. There was Anna, an NPC that was with the party for quite a while. She got a tattoo of raven feathers going into ravens as well, which were kind of like almost like to represent him, which was really nice. Yeah, which is nice. I think I've had a fair amount of characters die, and whenever they have a legacy like that in the world, it's something else, because I've had characters that have died and it's just been like, right, okay, let's roll a new one, let's crack on. And it's like, you forget about them and they're never dealt with like really much at all. But when you have small little aspects of fan service getting dripped in every now and then, as long as it's not too heavy handed, I think that it's a nice touch, and it makes you feel as if that wasn't a wasted endeavor. Like it's I think is like, I'm a big fan of the musical Hamilton, and it's the whole thing of legacy and like having that and someone to go on and tell your story and stuff. It's like a big deal, and it's makes you feel a connection to it, which is really great.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even at one of Tom's fantastic epilogues, and seeing Death finally being able to take souls again after the death curse has sort of been
Hmm.
lifted, um, and Lachlan not going to the death, the god of death, but instead being claimed
Hmm.
by the Raven Queen, and I thought that was stunning, stunning moment.
It was a good choice. I remember I kind of in part of the bleakness of Lachlan, I remember I said to Tom, I was like, he's grieving, but I still want him to suffer a bit. Like I kind of think that he's gonna endure so much. And part of an aspect that I wanted to play with him was how far can you test a creature that is just so uncommonly kind? Like how far do they have to go before he just snaps? And we never quite got to the extent of testing that. But I think at the very end, when the Raven Queen turns around and goes, right, she is safe, yeah, but you're working for me now, mate. I was like, I think that would have been a point where he would have just probably table flipped a bit and gone, oh, but then would have settled and gone, no, actually, it's probably for the best that way. And I think the way in which he told the imagery of it was really it's heartbreaking. The
It
whole
was
thing of
really
him just watching
heartbreaking.
the memories and then just, right, come on, let's go to work. I was
Go
like,
to
oh
work.
no.
Your work is never finished.
No,
I mean, religion in D&D is a really different beast.
it is
And
completely. And
how do you do that? I think, how do you work with your gods, with the DM and your god?
I mean, so with this particular character, I had a conversation with Tom beforehand, and I said to him, "Here's how I imagine it going. I don't think that you've got a particularly like. It's not like picking up a phone and saying, "Yo, Raven Queen, help us out here." It's very much a I'm serving you kind of aspect because almost I think of it more as like a patron really than a deity in that
Mm,
sense of how we played that, which probably may I could have really done him as a warlock, but I think narratively a cleric worked a little better. But in terms of religion itself, I think it's just making sure that you have that conversation with your DM beforehand and understanding what it is that you want to get out of it together. Because you get some people that want to play a very distant relationship. You get some that want to have a very personal and private kind of like relationship with their deity. And me, as someone that's complete and utter atheist and has never been brought up in a Christian household whatsoever or any religious household, I've never felt that connection. So I've always had a weird fascination with the idea of faith.
mm,
One of my favorite things, piece of media, is the book and film Contact, and the whole idea of someone completely devoid of faith having to rely on it as their justification for everything towards the end. Sorry,
mm.
spoilers. Um, and then having people of faith having that flipped as well. And yeah, crisis of faith stories have always been ones that have resonated with me. Much to the dismay of some of my religious players or formerly religious players who I've inserted that theme and I've tried to do it very kind of light touch and stuff, but it's called for at times very challenging role play.
Yeah,
Um, but I've always had a weird fascination with it, and I think it comes from the fact that I've never had that myself
yeah.
and wanting to explore it. And I think it's the whole thing of what we were saying before about role playing games being a way in which you can play around with these ideas and kind of embellishments of yourself or your ideas.
Mm, absolutely. I
Uh,
mean, it's sort of like, I think I explain it, but I'm fascinated with the idea of divine magic
mhm.
and what does that mean mechanically. Like,
Yeah.
what can you do that will piss off the god enough to take your powers away?
Mhm.
And it's just, I was talking to a friend of mine about clerics and warlocks to an extent. They have some of their free will sort of removed slightly, that they do need
Mhm.
to behave in a particular way, not
I
necessarily
think I,
do, but behave.
yeah, I mean, I think I read recently that clerics are the only ones that can actually have their powers taken away mechanically as
Mm.
written. But I mean, warlocks, I
Oh,
think if
mate.
you're not dangling the whole removal of powers over them, what's the point of having a warlock? Because
Yep.
otherwise they would just they'd sell everything. It'd be a fire sale for souls. But but yeah, I think the whole thing of that push and pull of an exterior influence on you that goes against the grain of what you're trying to achieve is such a good thing to play, because you're there and you're like, I've developed a friendship with this party and they want to go and do this thing, but you're telling me to go and do this. How do I resolve that without conflict? Because inter-party conflict, no one really wants, unless you're, I think, quite a juvenile player that is doing it. I think inter-party conflict is only good if you've got experienced players who know the limits of who they're playing with, and you're comfortable doing that. And I think an aspect of aftercare as well is also an essential part if that ever comes into play. Like, you really need to have a discussion and make sure that you understand that everyone's okay. Me attacking you as a character is not an attack on you as a person.
Maybe deja vu. I'm having a deja vu of some of the first sessions I've run with you.
But this is the thing. I mean, it's with when you've got an experienced group together. This is why D&D is magic. It's like when you have that and you have that kind of understanding between each other. It's honestly, it's the most fun thing you can do at a table, because it's like you can explore just these huge ideas and then come away from it and just make sure that you're all okay afterwards. And it's like you've told a wonderful story.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you do that. I think when you explore these really complex ideas with, say, religion and push and pull of things and that conflict.
Before I move on to Tilly, because we're running out of time very quickly, I just wanted to know, what was your favourite kind of story moment that Lachlan kind of affected?
Story moments, I think when the boat's name was revealed, that was a nice moment, but it wasn't necessarily one that he had engineered. It's weird, a lot of Lachlan's memories are kind of, I still find it difficult to even remember playing as him, because it feels so distant. And we've had that. I'm trying to think, actually.
I mean, one of the key things for Lachlan, I mean, I was reading your sheet, your kind of backstory sheet, was this idea of background, of like listener, watcher kind of concepts.
Yeah.
But I feel like they were always pushing or prodding something in the background that some of us never knew. Do you know what I mean?
It always was. I mean, there was I think actually, in terms of like moments and stuff, I think it was those campfire chats of just slipping in a small bit of information into people pouring their hearts and souls to me, and then me just chiming back with, here's a little nugget you get, like a backstory and stuff like that. And then I think that was probably one of my favorite aspects, because you then get the in-character and player reaction of just they're kind of talking and they just look up to you and go, you mother. That was always fun. I really liked that.
They're going from Lachlan to Craig Cleric, much more internal, to a much more external sort of,
oh Lord, here we go.
Slightly more secretive in a sense, but much more open at the table, I think. With Tilly.
Oh,
Tilly,
Lord.
the trickster, sort of gnome, wasn't she? Yeah, gnome.
Gnome trickster cleric.
There is nothing that compares to the craziness that is Tilly. Could you quickly describe Tilly for us?
2 words: lovable chaos.
Yep.
She was small, kind of pale blue, kind of similar thing of kind of echoes of Lachlan, effectively. Kind of physically took that characteristic to kind of throw you guys off a little bit. I tried to, because I wanted you to think, oh, okay, he's just come back with a Lachlan replacement, and I was like kind of just scheming and going, ha, it's really not Lachlan. But also, so she was little. She was very attuned to hiding. So one of the key aspects I kind of came up with when I looked through it and reading about gnomes was, because I was just fascinated. I was like, where do gnomes live? Like, in my head, I was like you get different interpretations of it. You get some people that are thinking they're very kind of like fey-like, and they're very like in these little tree settlements. And you get other ones that are, no, gnomes are tinkerers. They're very well intelligent creatures. Like, they have structures and settlements and stuff like that. So I kind of dotted around. But the one underlying thing was that they are very much taught to hide from a young age to avoid conflict and predators and stuff because of the nature of them being quite small. And that aspect of hiding was one that I really kind of latched onto because I thought there's a lot of mischief to be had here with that. So Tilly was that informed then the relationship with the patron, which was hiding and seeking.
Mhm.
And yeah, she's a nutter.
Because that was a thing of constantly hiding bits.
Yeah.
Wherever you went, didn't matter if it was the most sacred place in all of Chult or a really dangerous pillar, you would have to put something in it.
That was some of my favorite things were how that had pushed things. I think there were two, and you've made reference to the obelisk one, but the hiding of the. So I was looking through the list of all the things because I kept note of everything that I hid and where I hid it as well. Some of them which were quite funny. I was like a crow's claw that I hid in Calico's bag, and I've got in brackets. Oh, she found it, bugger. But it was in the Tomb of Electrous King, which I think was something that Tom had created as a kind of an add-on, which was tombs list, kind of a royal tomb, and then Tilly, in her infinite wisdom, decides to hide a royal insignia of another family in that tomb, which I'll spare everyone the convoluted kind of like backstory of it all. Effectively inferred that there was a third party in this love triangle that was emerging, and it was a lot more kind of nefarious than what it was. And as we said at the table, we were like, that can cause a war at some point. And we was like, yep,
that's the trickster.
She's just skipping away.
I mean, you were hiding so many ridiculous stuff, and you were talking to a god, a patron. To this day, I don't know who they were. I don't know who the god was. You just said hiding and seeking, but I never know who it is.
So what I did with this one, and this was a little bit, so I really try and measure myself. So I'm a fan of Critical Role and I watch it religiously. And around the time of us starting Tomb, they'd started their second campaign, and Laura Bailey came up with a trickster cleric whose god at that point was very much an unknown, but was very much known between Matt and Laura. And I loved that concept. So I took it a little step further and I went to Tom, have a deity, go for it. I don't know who they are. You tell me. And I was like, they can be out to fuck me. They can be out to help me. They can be out to do whatever. I don't know. All I know is that they have bestowed me these powers and that I find a sense of comfort from them being around. Because one of her underlying fears was long life and abandonment after having been abandoned by her old friends. And he took it and ran with it, came up with a beautiful story at the end, which turned out that she was one half of a twinned pair of angels. And that's how it came about, and this whole kind of cycle of reincarnation. And it was quite beautiful at the end of it. And I was like, that's totally not what I was thinking it would be. I thought it would there was a full gamut of theories I think we went through where we were talking about potentially it being her, like her voice in her head, like this whole thing of just, the power's within you kind of like rubbish. Like a warlock situation that just looks like a cleric situation. There was so much that it could have been that would have been a lot worse. But thankfully, Tom is a benevolent DM and it's quite nice.
But there was a real sense of like imaginary friendness to it, like you were playing.
There was. The time. And I think it was that. I think my favorite thing about the whole concept of me being the hider and then being the seeker, and me having to kind of just throw these items around and then go, did you find that one? And they go, yes, I did find that one. Or like, no, I didn't. And I'm like, haha, I've got one over you. Yeah, you have to go there. You have to look harder. I just love that whole idea of it just being one big game of playtime.
Yeah. Because as soon as you said the Seeker, then I was like, oh yeah, I remember now, the Seeker. Of course.
But yeah, it was a strange one, and again, it was a whole thing of juxtaposition in the campaign of just like a bleak campaign, and then having whimsy just about. But that whimsy came at a cost at times. I mean, it was yeah, she did some things that I to this day regret, which was quite sad.
Yeah, that is sad. I mean, we just talked about a moment that we screwed over. We screwed over Tom. Well, but then he rightly so screwed us over as well because of it.
I blame you entirely.
Yeah, blame me. It was completely me, but I was trying to help. You know, it was there was a feeling of help going on here.
Yeah.
So spoilers, big spoilers for anyone playing Tomb
Yeah.
of Annihilation. There is an obelisk. Don't do what we did. So essentially, you had stolen something from someone.
I'd stolen. I had traced a map of Uptown, and in doing so, the Seeker took away my powers because he was like, "Oh, you're worshipping that god now, are you?" And I was like, "No, no, 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 no. It was just a fun game. Leave me alone." And he took away my powers, and me playing the abandonment, she was distraught. That's the one thing that would trigger her to go off the deep end. And so in my stage afterwards of frantically hiding things to kind of win his approval afterwards, I turn after having stolen the family
Sacred.
mason tools of
Sacred.
our
Sacred.
other cleric in the closet. They was very sacred, yes. Thank you for layering on the guilt. And turned and looked towards the obelisk, and then out of the corner of my eye, I see Calico, and Calico's there just going, and I'm just there going, oh. What makes this even worse, though, is I knew as a player what was in that obelisk.
Right.
Because I'd seen a spoiler video from Puffin Forest talking about an Adventurers League one where they were like, in the thing, if your players push over this obelisk or harm it in any way, they're dumb and they deserve to die. And then I knew what was in and knew how powerful it was and how weak we were at that point. And still I had to play the character and had to do what I couldn't take that knowledge into it. So yeah, with all the might in the world, cracked into the obelisk to unleash what was in there, which was, I think it was like a CR something, like double digits at the very least.
Double digits. Demon.
Oh, it was awful.
But at the same time, we've got a zombie Triceratops, a zombie T-Rex coming at us as well at exactly the same time. And it was definitely Tom's like, fuck you. This is what's happening now.
And this is the thing. I mean, like, players are fully free to sabotage their DMs in whatever way they can. You've got to accept the consequences.
Yep.
And I think a good DM brings real world consequences. It's one thing to punish your players and like sort of unleash something that is undeserved. But if you punish them in a way that is fair, I think it's wonderful because it's like, yeah, we deserve that.
Yeah, completely agree.
That was awful.
Mr. Rob Thompson has just joined us, so I just want to say hello to Rob. He's again playing another trickster, so this is a perfect time for you, Rob, to be joining us. So like, yeah, so we did this really bad thing, but doing that bad thing, you were then able to hide something in the obelisk.
I was.
Which was the thing that kind of got it back in the end, wasn't it? Or led the path to get it back.
Yeah. So it helped us, I think, because it kind of brought us together. It had a moment of peace and quiet afterwards where we're like the dust had settled and then we'd gained the additional items. And we went into the team, I think, a little bit more emboldened, which was kind of nice, I think. It was good to have that little bit of finality beforehand. And it was also nice to go into the team feeling like heroes beforehand. And having things kind of aired a little bit before the team went and completely royally screwed us all left, right, and centre.
Yeah, that was horrible.
As the team does, it was if anyone plays Tomb of Annihilation, prepare yourselves. You'll never play dungeons in the same way ever again.
No, I mean, our problem was we were completionists as well. So we were like, every please.
Room, every level.
Yeah, let me see every trap. Let me see every single way that I might die. And it's still to this day the worst death I've ever had. Oh, being drowned in wine is like it's the worst death I've ever seen. I'm not going to tell you what room that was because that was too much. But we lost our last first level character from that one, the one that was from the beginning. We lost them on the same room, and an NPC in that room as well. And there wasn't even a gift in there.
No,
Of all things.
and it was moments like that were incredibly bleak. Like I remember having to RP it afterwards of just me and Josh's character Mervek just sat outside waiting, and then doors opening and just bodies flying out, and we just go, "Fuck! This is how we are playing death marches right now. It's this going forward." But then saying that, in the bleakness of how that was, we did end up having probably one of my favorite hero entrances ever, of the return of former characters coming back to try and help their friends. And I was like, I loved it, especially because of the bait and switch of you and Ben. No, it was you and Josh at that point, because it was Alma and Rumrunt that came back, wasn't it?
Well, we had Granny first. Granny came back first.
Yeah, Granny and Ralvin.
Yeah, because Granny came in and delivered. She was from the past, divination wizard who had buried herself in the tomb to be woken up at this time.
It was wonderful.
Got the information out to Tilly. I think it was to you actually, and was like, you are dangerous, and you could either go all the way or you can hold back. But we don't know what you are. You are the string in time that has 100 different threads that come away from it. And then and Ralvin was her wife's brother. And so Granny lasted a session, died with the beholder. Invisible fucking beholder.
I think oh god, that was the epic quote of Joe Thorpe coming out of it and just going, "Fuck Gary Gygax, fuck him."
So hey, I know.
Fuck this tomb, fuck this game,
fuck everything.
And then just we turn to you and we're like, and he goes, "Just the game." Like, funny. So good.
But yeah, coming back as Rumrunt and Alma.
Oh, you guys did the full bait and switch. You told me all week as well. Oh yeah, we're gonna come back as monk bros. We're gonna turn up. We're gonna be like, it's gonna be like a bad buddy cop film, and we're gonna both be playing monks. And I was just there going, okay, it's pretty sick. And all of a sudden, Tom plays the themes that he does for the characters, and then they come in. I think at that point it was Welcome to the Jungle.
Welcome to the Jungle. Yeah.
And then you just leap over the fire, cleave the axe around, and just destroy them. And I'm just there going, oh my god, thank God.
Okay, so I think we're coming up to the last couple of minutes. I suppose what I would like to hear is kind of, what is your best piece of advice for anyone who's looking to play clerics in D&D? This is a question that I haven't prepared you for, so I understand that you're going to be there.
Spiritual Weapon is the greatest spell in the history of D&D. Non-concentration, bonus action attack that you can use, and it's amazing. Equip that for one thing mechanically. Secondly, Tricksters. Duplicity is, again, one of the best features ever. I love it so much. It can be used for shenanigans, particularly if you've got a very kind DM that allows you to kind of extend the timing of which you can allow your duplicity to be enabled. Mechanically, definitely those two things. I think it's one of the most versatile classes. If you want, you can be played so many different ways. I mean, I played a Trickster Cleric, I played a Grave Cleric. We had I can't remember what cleric he was, but we had another cleric in the party as well, and it never felt as if we were all stepping on each other's toes for the Same spells. We were never looking to each other, for one thing, because I never healed anyone. There was never that conversation beforehand of just, okay, well, if I take this spell, you take that spell, and all this kind of metagaming beforehand. It's one of the true classes that touches everything, because you can play a melee, you can play a spellcaster, you can meld the two. It's a wonderful one to play. And then for story and background, I would just say, think about, if you're going to play a character whose entire definition of themselves entire definition of their abilities comes from a relationship with a deity, know the deity and know your goals of what you want to get out from it. because that will inform everything. If you understand what the relationship is, then you can play with it so much, because then you know how to test it, and that's where it gets fun.
Yeah.
Compliance is never fun. It's always fun to break the rules. It's always fun to sabotage.
Yeah, that is such a great line. I'm gonna steal that so much. But I know that you need to run because you're running another game tonight.
Yep.
So
Forge of Fury.
You're playing Forge of Fury. And I hope that your players take your plans and burn them in your face and do whatever they want to do. But I want to say thank you so much for coming and chatting. I mean, it was really lovely reminiscing with you about some characters from before. And I do hope that we can play again at some point together. Fingers crossed, mate. Well, next week, we've actually got another one of our group is coming to come and say hello. So Mr. John Cooper.
Yes, we've spoken about this. He says he's going to say the absolute opposite of what I say, which is lovely.
So Mr. John Cooper is going to come and join us. He's going to be talking about a couple of his different characters. I'm hoping to chat to him about NPCs as well, because his NPCs are incredible. So do join us next week at the same time as usual in the same places, as you can see me and Mr. John Cooper talk about another set of gnomes. So thank you very much for coming, and as usual, keep playing role-playing games, keep playing games, and of course do stay safe. I'll see you later. Bye.
See you guys.